Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Musical Theater Project and our series, Let's Go to the Movies at Home. We have a lot of folks with us tonight from all over the country. I think that's because this movie is truly beloved. And this movie, of course, is MGM's Meet Me in St. Louis. It's from 1944, starring Judy Garland, directed by her soon-to-be husband, Vincent Minnelli. Many of you must be getting tired of hearing me ask you to read this slide because this is the 18th time we have read this slide together. But if you're joining us for the first time tonight, and we do have some first timers, we know that, you need to read it because these instructions tell you how to participate, not just by using the chat, but by letting us see you on screen, which is always fun. Debbie Schinker and Heidi Lang and Joanna May Cullinan will help us out as usual. But tonight, making her Let's Go to the Movies debut is my friend and colleague, Nancy Meyer. So hello, Nancy.
Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. I've been kind of spying on a lot of these without video and really observing. And I've just loved all your insights and your comments. It's been fun. Bill mentioned several possibilities for me to co-host, and this one just jumped out at me. It's just so special for so many reasons.
And I want to pin you down on that. But first, we have a new tradition here on this series, which is that we take a little survey. And we want to ask you right now, how many of you liked this film and how many of you did not enjoy this film? And we will tabulate for you. My goodness. Wow. This is almost identical with The Merry Widow 2 weeks ago. At the moment, it's 92% yes, 7% no. How about that? So yeah, beloved, no question about that. Before we open this up to everybody, Nancy, I do want to pin you down, and I want to ask you, well, what was it about this film that you loved? We were saying earlier, you probably didn't see it until you were an adult, but it doesn't matter. What did you love about it?
Yeah. Well, I came back to it when my daughter was young because I thought, oh, I remember this being so lovely and nostalgic, and she loved music. So we watched it again, and I think what's so amazing is that the more I've seen it actually over these last few weeks, I just see the care in every single frame in that movie and the incredibly vibrant colors and the whole sense of nostalgia and the coziness and the warmth of the whole thing. It feels wonderful to see it around Christmas, but anytime. I don't know. I guess that's all I have to say. It's good to have come back to it. I hadn't seen it for quite a long time. And actually, no, go ahead. I was really done. What?
Oh, no, I was just going to say we're going to come back to some of the points that you just raised, but it occurs to me I gave you a lousy introduction because I should have said, for anybody who has seen our Song Is You concert and cabaret series, you probably think of Nancy as an old friend because she does so many of those shows, and she's a superb pianist and accompanist and coach. And though she won't admit it, I'm going to just say that she's also a wonderful singer. She is. So it is great to have you. Before we open this up to the St. Louis fans, we should probably say that we're running this in December because this is thought of by a lot of people as a holiday movie, since the most famous scene in it is set just before Christmas. So at least that's when I watch it. I don't know about you guys, but I always watch it right around Christmas time. But it covers a full year in the life of the Smith family, 1903, 1904. And somebody out there is going to is going to be a smart aleck and say this. So I'm going to say it first, which is, yes, you're right. Technically, it was the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, but it became known much more popularly as the St. Louis World's Fair. I wonder if do we have the Winspleys here yet? They're from Boston and they intended to be, oh, good. Okay, great. Because Roger, our friend Roger, did some real research on this. And he sent me an email because he wanted me to know, and I want all you guys to know, what effect this World's Fair had on St. Louis. So, Roger, you're up. What did you learn?
Well, great. Thanks, Bill. Well, my father's family is from St. Louis, and so I had done some research recently and had learned about the great tornadoes of 1896, which is the third most deadly tornado in U.S. history. So that was the first thing I learned about St. Louis around that time. But then I started looking at the population changes and realizing that St. Louis was really on the rise. In 1880, it was the 8th largest city. In, in 1900, it had jumped to 4th.
Wow.
And I started to think about, obviously there must be dissertations on this, but it has both it was the jumping off point from the eastern part of the country to the Midwest and West. So it had that horizontal impetus, but it was also on the Mississippi River. It is on the Mississippi River. So it was getting the north-south impacts as well. But and then after 1900 to 1920, it did jump back, even though the number of people increased, population increased, but it fell behind Detroit. Gee, I wonder why. And Cleveland, which became much more of an industrial power. But St. Louis was really on the rise. And even up into the 1940s, it was one of the largest cities, remaining one of the largest cities, and benefited from the military growth.
Yeah, neat. That's great. So this film really is about something that was happening as a phenomenon at that time in America in terms of this this city. More than anything, and Nancy suggested this a few minutes ago, this is really a story about families. It's really about families. And it's based on stories written by Sally Benson. You may have heard me talk about that in the intro. Stories that ran in the New Yorker that were quite popular, that became a book. And she was really writing about her own family. And I made a mistake in the intro, so I want to correct myself. The character of Agnes, who is the second youngest daughter in the Smith family, she was actually the model for the character in the stories, which I think is wonderful. So if you add all of that up, it means there are episodes in this movie that are actually true. And I think that is just a charming thing about the stories. Obviously, you know, Nancy used the word nostalgic a few minutes ago, and that we always say nostalgic when we talk about this movie. And this world of the Smiths is romanticized to some extent. But I think one of the great things about it is that Vincent Minnelli, who directed it, he wanted to have it both ways. He did want that element of nostalgia to be strong, but he also wanted to make a film that would feel real. In terms of, you know, you said the details, for instance, Nancy. I mean, there's so many details that feel real. And I know Jody Maley-Kirk is here tonight, and I picked out a question just for Jody Maley-Kirk because it's a Jody kind of question, which is, Jody, share with us, just pick any one moment in this film that feels particularly real to you in terms of family life, and why?
Well, I think the whole film, I mean, I am the youngest of 5 and I have 7 kids altogether. So those big bustling family scenes just feel just like so real. You know, when they're eating their dinner quickly so they can all listen to the conversation,
Listen to-
and pushing their father, all the kids kind of knowing something that somebody else in the family doesn't. But I mean, I think for me, the most moment that always gets me, and I think it's everyone, is when they're singing "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." I'm the
Yeah,
youngest of five, and I think I'm Tootie even still. And that moment though for me is much more than the song. It's the gift of sisters. I have two older sisters, and they would always put my needs before theirs. And I think that's the
yeah,
time in the movie where you see Judy Garland giving up her own, loss of romance and loss of everything, because she needed to tell her sister that it was going to be okay, that
okay,
things would be
okay.
okay. And so that's the moment that just always crushes me, because it's so beautifully selfless.
It is. Thank you. Yeah, for sure. Speaking of Tootie, my grandmother, I want to tell you that my grandmother adored this film, and we watched it several times together. And she was born in 1896. So that means she would have been, she would have been about Tootie's age, in terms of this story. And I remember asking her one time, so were you ever sort of a bad girl like Tootie is? And my grandmother said, worse. So I think that's more proof that this is real. It's a real story in a lot of ways. Um, Nancy, we're just gonna jump around here as we always do. You were not crazy about the hairstyles in
Oh,
this movie.
oh, you're bringing that up. You know what? Uh, well, going back to, Judy Garland, she was thought to be more beautiful in this film
Than
than
any
any
other.
other.
Yeah.
Yes, I am going to say one little thing that's pretty interesting, and maybe I don't know if anybody ran across it, but she had little nose inserts and teeth caps that she normally had to use in all her films to fix her teeth and change the shape of her nose. And the makeup person, whose name I don't know, on this movie said, oh no, you're a beautiful, beautiful girl. So it's kind of the first time we're seeing Judy without any adjustments.
Oh, neat. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I read that.
That's
But
cool.
what I said to Bill about the hair, it's just a little thing. It bothers me. It does frame the hair beautifully, but Judy's and her older sister's hair, right? Those
Yeah,
bangs that are like way up
yeah,
here and then
yeah,
they go out here.
yeah,
That's, I just think
yeah.
it's a little over the top, but still it's charming. So
And we should say that it's very authentic in terms of the women's apparel in 1904. That Irene Sharaff, the Broadway costume designer, did this film, and she actually was inspired for the women's clothes by the Sears Roebuck catalog of 1903. So that's how how authentic it was, at least on a certain layer. You may have heard me say in the intro that there were two big potential problems about this movie that made it almost not get made. One was that Judy Garland, who was 21, did not want to play another teenager. So she had to be talked into it by Vincent Minnelli. And the other problem was that the executives at MGM said, where's the plot? Where's the conflict? This isn't about anything. And of course, going back to what Jody and Nancy have already said, actually, the crisis in this movie, the very real chance that they're going to have to move to New York, that's as big a crisis as I know of, almost in any story, because of the way the family is so bonded together. Huge, huge crisis.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
Sandy
We got a hand up?
Rosefield has her hand up. Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you. So you're on. Where are you?
She's
Here I am.
unmuting.
I think
Unmute.
I'm muting. I had read that although the costumes were spectacular, and appropriate. But I had read that although it was said in 1902, that the women had mid-1940s hairstyles. Now, I was not old enough in the mid-40s to know the difference, but that's something that I had read. So I don't know the accuracy of that.
Very interesting idea. I think that could well be true. And that sort of 1940s thing also applies to a bit of the music in this film
Yes.
too. So
Yes.
I think, again, they had it both ways. I just have to tell you, the moment in this movie that feels so true to me, I love it, is after the father has announced that they're going to be moving to New York, and everyone is so despondent, and they leave the table, they leave the room, and the father and mother sing a song written for this movie called You and I, which is so touching. But what makes it especially touching, and what makes it such a good example of musical theater at its best, is that while they're singing the song, you see members of the family return to the room, to the parlor where the piano is, and picking up the dessert that they had left at the table because they were so upset and left the room, picking up the dessert and congregating around the piano.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
It's
I mean,
beautiful.
it shows their sort of support and acceptance, you know, of,
Yeah,
don't you think, their love, family love. Yeah.
it
And
does. And
Bill, I
I
have to
connected
jump in
to,
and say, I'm
yeah,
sorry to interrupt, but I have to jump in because my
do it, Dan.
background is the moment that you just spoke of, because it's my favorite moment in the entire
Oh,
Yeah,
movie. So that's why I
yeah,
selected my background. You just totally nailed it. Just so
oh,
beautiful.
yeah.
And I love
It is a great
how the mother in that moment that you just beautifully described, you know, they have all this tension, and typically, you know, there might just be like a fight or a blow up, but what does she do? She puts her hand on his shoulder,
Yes,
she walks over to the piano, and with
yes,
art, she heals him with art. It's just stunning,
yeah.
stunning in every way.
And
It
our,
is, and there's another layer to this too. I just get this in fast, which is that we have to remember that in that period in American culture, families had to create their own entertainment. So the fact that the father and mother are sitting at the piano in that parlor, that was a big deal. Sheet music was a big, big deal. And it's so touching as well, Daniel, don't you think, that when he says to her, "It's wonderful to hear you play again." Apparently it had been a while, you know,
Yeah,
just a little
beautiful.
detail.
I
It's
love
so
how she
beautiful.
transposes the piece for him when it's too high.
Or
It's
yeah,
such,
Yeah.
yeah,
so sweet.
yeah.
That scene actually, you know, if people complain that, you know, maybe lack of story or whatever, that scene you just described, Bill, could be a key moment, any Chekhov play, in any truly human
Absolutely,
play. Truly
absolutely.
classical in its relevance, I would say. And I have to say hi,
I
Jody.
would say
Nice to see you.
and Arthur dubbed the father's voice.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
Arthur
Arthur.
Freed, who was the producer of this film, had been a Hollywood songwriter with Nacio Herb Brown, and they wrote You and I for this movie, though I don't think they're credited. I could be wrong about that. I don't think
No,
that
but
they took credit for it. It's Hugh Martin, you know, and Ralph Blaine, but that's another story. Anyway, don't you think it's kind of amazing that Margaret O'Brien at the age of 7 gets second billing in this movie, right under Judy Garland? And don't you think she deserved it? How about Margaret O'Brien's performance in this movie? I see nodding heads. Yes, a thumbs up from Daniel. Yeah. I think she really, at the age of 7, sort of walks the line. She could be totally obnoxious, or she could be just sort of totally cute, but she's neither. She finds this territory in the middle, and it's a very nuanced performance, I think, from her at 7.
She's very real. I mean, that's that
Very real.
realism. She's a brat sometimes, and she's cute and nice and funny others, and that's really real.
Yeah, human. Yeah, human. Just a very full character, even as a little girl. So I want to talk about a Margaret O'Brien moment that's not in the Christmas scene. And I want to bring Bridget Emerson into this because we get emails. One of the really striking scenes in this film is one of the old musical numbers, because Arthur Freed and Vince Minnelli wanted to mix new songs with old songs, like Meet Me in St. Louis, Louis, that's 1903. Right. And another one of the old songs is Under the Bamboo Tree, also from 1903. And that's when Margaret O'Brien and Judy Garland do a kind of cakewalk that is charming, because you can tell it's a little awkward for Margaret O'Brien, which makes it even, I think, more cool. But Bridget pointed out something very interesting about this song. And you should know that this song, Under the Bamboo Tree, was written by two African Americans, Tom Cole and J. Rosamond Johnson. So Bridget, tell us what you noticed about this performance.
So I attended a lecture recently that was talking about African American heritage in popular dance. And one of the things that they touched on was the cakewalk and how that was something that arose, they can't say exactly when or where, but it arose sometime in pre-Civil War. And it was slaves who were mimicking and making fun of and exaggerating the ballroom dances of their masters and of the elite. And the slave owners actually, instead of being offended, found it entertaining. And they would sometimes hold contests where they would judge their slaves and the slaves would perform. And I think they didn't necessarily completely understand the mockery that was behind it. But in about the 1870s, it sort of took a little bit of a turn in the sense that white performers in vaudeville who were performing in blackface started performing the cakewalk as well. And it also started to become popular in Europe. And then Black performers performing in blackface were also performing the cakewalk and trying to sort of reclaim it. So it's a very racially, socially awkward moment in this film, where you have white people who are imitating Black people who are imitating white people. And the lyrics of this song are also very racially awkward. And they're appropriate for the 1870s when we were hitting that vaudeville period where the lyrics of the songs that were being performed reflected that type of subject matter. So it's just very racially awkward moment in the film.
Very perceptive, Bridget, I must say. And I want to go back to the Winsleys for a moment, because you guys noticed a small detail that I had never noticed that tells us something about white privilege and racial stereotypes in 1904, or for that matter, in 1944, when this movie was made. Can I ask you to share what you noticed?
Sure. As you noticed, there weren't people of color anywhere to be seen, but there was an Aunt Jemima doll. I don't know if anybody saw the Aunt Jemima doll.
I didn't. I've never seen it. I've never noticed that.
Yeah.
That was the only hint.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. Nancy, I know you came armed with at least a few questions for our participants tonight. Why don't you hit them with one?
Well, is there? I know there's something that in the storyline, or the way a part of the story was filmed and told, that bothered me. I don't want to just say what it is. Is there anything else that bothered anybody about what you saw that today would certainly not be a good idea in a movie? Can anybody? I mean, because
go ahead and share your own. Go ahead.
Just the patriarchal, that was so different from today. The patriarchal, where the man goes and everybody does what he wants, and he makes the decisions, rules the roost, and
yeah.
But they did it well. I mean, they did it well.
Yes. I mean, it was accurate to the time. The one, when Tootie accuses John Truitt of trying to kill her.
Yeah,
He had evidently assaulted her. At least I know it was a lie, but he had evidently assaulted her. There was even hair in her fist, his hair. She was injured, a tooth broken. And I felt there was this very relaxed, reaction to that. I mean, from the family, maybe other than Judy Garland, but there was like, oh, I think people would be so up in arms today about any such, possibility with
Nancy,
a child.
I've never seen so much response to your question. We have 5 people that want to weigh in.
Okay.
Yeah, including Carol Salkin. I do see you, Carol. So
Sure.
Carol Pred,
Great.
Carol,
Great.
Blanche,
Carol.
Deborah, and Sandy. So go ahead, Carol Salkin. You go first.
What I found disarming was the fire that was in
The bonfire.
Oh, the bonfire, the furniture.
Bonfire with these children around it. I thought, oh, no adults. That kind of got to me. I wondered how realistic would something like that have been.
Well, actually, my own research turned up the fact that we're talking Halloween, trick or treat, children setting bonfires by themselves, and that was actually in part of the culture. And so was the deal of throwing flour in somebody's face. That was part of the trick in trick or treat. And I didn't realize that until recently.
They called it killing each other, killing someone, throwing the flour.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Deborah had her hand up, I think, right, Debbie?
Yep.
Deborah Matthews did.
So I really, I was one of those who didn't like the film. It started with the cakewalk, and then the whole Halloween sequence I was appalled by. I thought the destruction of property that I wasn't bothered by the fire so much as what was being thrown into the fire. I wanted to know whose stuff that was. And
yeah.
And I was really upset by the accusation of John Pruitt, and more importantly, by the fact that they were trying to put a trolley off the tracks. I mean, this is vandalism. Like, this is way beyond. And the whole idea of representing a dead body on the track. This is I was between the racism and that sort of mob mentality. I'm like, oh, these are the junior Ku Klux Klan members.
She wasn't punished for. I know.
No, so that I was really set off by it. So anyway.
Daniel, you should, since you love dramaturgical research, you should go back to the Sally Benson stories and report back to us in January how close this film comes to what Sally Benson originally wrote. I think we'd be interested in that, whether we agree or disagree or like the film or don't like the film. I'd certainly love to know about, whether she was writing about vandalism and all of that stuff at that time, or whether those were layers that were added by Vincent Minnelli.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. I think it's certainly worth exploring. I mean, obviously the film is a true classic. It certainly it certainly has held the test of time, at least from a lot of viewers' perspectives. I also think that, one of the things I appreciated is it didn't really pander, in moments. I think there was a lot of truthful sentiment expressed, throughout. But I agree with you. I think going back to the source material would be fascinating to see how it holds up.
You've got the assignment, Daniel.
I do.
Blanche has her hand up, and then Carol Pred.
And this is really interesting. Blanche is here this time without Jack, because we don't know how you have voted, Blanche, but we know that your husband didn't like this film.
You didn't give me a middle. I'll answer that first, and then I'll say what I was going to say. I thought it was worth watching for the tech. The art, the costumes, the makeup, the settings were freaking gorgeous. We were deeply distressed by the Halloween, and we did do some dramaturgical research. You would expect Jack to do that. Those were all things they did at Halloween around the turn of the century. Yeah. maybe not in 44, but certainly in 04. All those things with the flower and the fires. And I think they weren't upset about the kid lying and accusing the young man because they knew this little kid. After all, she's number 6. This child is number 6 of 6, and she has to get attention any way she can. And I think she was mischievous, and her interest in death, while appropriate for a 5-year-old, was way beyond. She said, I got to dig up all the dolls I buried. So the Halloween part was what actually put Jack right off his feed. It really was most distressing, and trying to derail a trolley where people could really get hurt. And nobody seemed upset about that. What really
it was sort of who Tootie is being, Tootie's being Tootie.
Well, Tootie was being Tootie, yeah. And I think probably John pulled her away, and that's how she got his hair in her hand. She was fighting him.
I think that's probably right.
Wasn't he trying to get her away from being questioned by the police? Or
Well, or sure she didn't get hurt. I mean, did they actually get the trolley off the tracks? I'm not sure. They really wanted to hurt people. But what really distressed me as a woman born in the 3 years after this was made, and now I'm 73, my feminist self had a horrible time with the plot.
Yes.
I mean, my feminist side just was like, oh my God, he says we're going and we're going. My father moved us every 4 years for his work, and we just did it. Now, there weren't 6 of us, there were only 2 of us. But it was always discussed, and it was always just what we did as a family unit. This man just put his foot down and said, we're going. And that wasn't even the worst part. There was just so much. I mean, here's this house full of women who have to manipulate and scheme. And that was why I didn't like it. The music was lovely. It was visually gorgeous. I like the costumes right down to the corsets and the bustle. You see how the bustle is made under the clothing.
Yeah.
But the story itself, I'm sure it's of its time, and we are not of its time. This is 116 years ago, and that's worth talking about, isn't it, Daniel? So anyway, that's what I wanted to say. Jack was so distressed by it that even though he did go down the rabbit hole of Halloween, he really didn't feel like discussing it today because he didn't want to ruin everybody's time.
Okay, yeah.
Although he says hi.
Poor Carol Fred's been waiting, and
I
after
know.
Carol,
I
then
was just about-
Sandy.
and Sandy as well, yes.
I had a similar thought to what the last lady said about attitudes toward women, but what I noticed, or one of the things I noticed that she didn't mention, is that they were talking about the oldest daughter going to college, and Judy Garland's character says, oh, but she may not have to because she may be getting engaged.
Right.
My God.
Yeah.
Oh, and even John was going to give up going to college, possibly to marry Esther. Yeah.
Okay, so at least it worked both ways.
Yeah,
you know.
true.
So Sandy had her hand up. Sandy wanted to share a comment?
Oh, just about me? No.
Oh, I thought you had your hand up. Sorry.
No, Sandy has her hand up. You got to unmute, Sandy.
Good to see you, Cynthia.
Okay, first of all, I felt such empathy for Judy Garland in that corset where she could hardly breathe.
Oh,
Horrible
I know.
hardly think. I wanted to say, honey, put on a comfortable dress. You'll have a good time tonight. But in regard to Tootie, from the perspective of a film today, you would not see a 5-year-old girl singing and talking about drunkenness, murder, and mayhem the way that she did, unless it was a psychological drama where she was in therapy. So that's something that just jumped out at me. I realized that for the time, they were trying to make her cute and attention gathering, but boy, that would never make it in a film today.
No, not at all. But you know, guys, we could say that about almost all of the musicals we have screened since April. that they would not, that would not happen in a contemporary
Right,
film. So
right.
it always brings us back to the point of we have to put it in context.
Right.
And it's fine that it doesn't work for you, or you're offended by it, or you say, oh my God, thank God we don't live in that place anymore. But 1904, 1944, the context is important, as
Yeah,
always.
the war context, the
The war
Americana
context.
aspect, what we
It's
were
an
fighting
Americana.
for, white America, yes.
Yeah, why?
Yes.
Exactly. That's the context.
Bridget's got some more to share with us, Bill.
Oh, I love to hear Bridget.
Thanks. So, like many of you, I was a little disturbed by the Halloween scene, and I used to do some Victorian historical interpretation in high school. And I thought, how is it that I have never heard of this? So I went down the rabbit hole online, as well as many of you did, and I discovered, Deborah, that all the things that you mentioned that were so terrifying are actual cases that happened. So if you look it up online, there's an article, well, several articles online that were really good. And they talk about an incident where a body, like a fake body, was put on the track. And they talk about an incident where a trolley was derailed, and all the things that we saw are all things that actually happened. So I found that very enlightening.
And you know, Bridget, we'll have to wonder what people are going to be saying about us in 75 years. You know, I mean, the story goes on, doesn't it? I have to turn our attention for a few minutes to Hugh Martin, who wrote both words and music for the three major songs in this film. And as I said in the intro, Hugh became a dear friend of mine. He died in 2011 at the age of 97, and he was still writing at that age, by the way. And these songs should be singled out. They deserve to be singled out. We have we have several first-rate musicians here tonight, but we'll start with you, Nancy, on The Boy Next Door.
All three of these songs are extraordinary. I mean, I saw, I don't know if it was in your introduction, but Hugh Martin spent 3 months doing nothing but writing these songs.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, The Boy Next Door is unusual for its time. It's early to have had, you know, Hugh Martin has had a sort of a jazzy approach. You know, he understood harmony, and the melody of that relies heavily on this sort of leading tone that feels like it's not in the chord, right? Da da da. Da da, you sang it yourself, Bill. Da 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 da, and you really lean into that non-chord tone, and then move to the more expected note. Even in the verse of it, which Judy Garland really pointed out as she sang it, da 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 da. And I think all these kind of leaps in the melody really just are expressing so beautifully that yearning, you know, that yearning in the song for him to notice her. You know, it's such an interesting piece.
It's ahead of its time. Bridget, how about saying something about the trolley song? I know you're a Hugh Martin fan.
I am a Hugh Martin fan. I had more some general thoughts about him rather than the trolley song specifically, if you'd prefer to hear those. I don't have as strong a response to the trolley song as I tend to have to many of his other things.
Trolley song really gets me. And I was saying to Nancy earlier tonight, it's kind of cool that Stephen Sondheim about 20 years ago did a list of theater and film songs that he wishes he had written. And the trolley song was on that list, which is why Barbara Cook then put it in her repertoire. The little story that I love about trolley song is that Frank Sinatra would never sing it. As I said in the intro, he said, too many words.
and one little interesting thing I ran across is that Hugh Martin didn't really feel very inspired to write. He was told by Arthur Freed, please write a trolley song. And he thought, well, can't it just be a song they sing on the trolley? It has to be a trolley song. But I think his Blaine, what's his first name?
Ralph Blaine.
Helped him out by, he saw a picture of an old fashioned trolley and the caption was clang, clang, clang with the jolly little trolley. And that set things in motion. Yeah, I love that song.
And Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas happens to be my favorite Christmas song of all time, which is why if we had been performing our Christmas cabaret this winter, we'd be closing the show with that song for the 15th time. You'll have to wait till next year to hear it for the 15th time. But I read, and I didn't know this, it was such a big song in World War II because of the yearning, and in the same way White Christmas does, but that servicemen would go to what am I thinking of? The clubs for servicemen.
Canteens?
In New York
Stage
City.
door canteen.
The Stage Door Canteen, thank you.
Canteen.
And that they would hear that song and they would literally weep. And you know, it's already been pointed out by Jody that that whole scene is really, I think, rings so true because of the relationship between the sisters. But also, and this is one of the famous stories about the movie, the lyric was changed several times for this song by Hugh Martin. And the first time it was changed was when Hugh Martin first wrote the song. The lyric began, "Have yourself a merry little Christmas. It may be your last. Next year, we may all be living in the past." So sad. And Judy Garland said she wouldn't sing it. And Hugh Martin said, "I'm not changing it." And Tom Drake, who played the boy next door, said to Hugh Martin, "Let's have a cup of coffee." And he said to Hugh Martin, "You have got to change that lyric. Don't be stupid." So Hugh finally relented, and now we know. Now we know it as
Let your heart be light.
Christmas, let your heart be light. From now on, our troubles will be out of sight. That was a rewrite at Judy Garland's insistence. And then there's more to this story. In the 1950s, Sinatra was making a Christmas album. Bridget, do you know this story? And he said to Hugh, can you jolly up that line that has muddle in it? So until then, we'll have to muddle through somehow. So Hugh Martin did edit that line, and he jollied it up by writing "Hang a shining star upon the highest brow," which is the way most of us know that song. But Nancy and I, a couple of years ago, decided we're going back to muddle. And in our show, we use that word. We think it's a great word. And sadly, isn't that a word for right now?
Yes,
It
is.
Jody,
yes, it is.
Yeah,
No, that's
exactly
exactly what I was going to say. I
yes,
think
it is.
One of the reasons that song always gets to me is that the paradox of Christmas, especially during difficult times, and he nailed it so beautifully in that song. So after you've lost someone or you are dealing with the very real reality of not being able to gather and have the same traditions as you have, there's a loss and a joy, and it's that paradox. Yes. And muddle is such a great word for that. We'll have to muddle through because it's that paradox of feeling great joy at the season and the wonder and the possibility, but also that deep ache, that sense of loss of what can never be again, you know.
Yeah, I don't know of another song from this era that would have daringly used that word.
I don't think so.
And another thing that Hugh was very proud of in that song, which he told me about, I did a long, a 3-hour radio documentary on Hugh Martin that will be rebroadcast on Footlight Parade and in 4 weeks. So I hope you can catch that. But one of the things he told me about that song was he was very proud of saying "Merry Little Christmas." The idea of using little as an adjective for that holiday in the context of that song and the world of those people at that time. He considered that a very poetic idea, and I agree. It was. So
Bill,
all
Sarah,
three.
Sarah May has been waiting patiently.
Sarah
and I
May, I'm
think-
so sorry.
I
I'm
think
so
Cynthia Dettelbach has a comment too.
Okay, great. Sarah, nice
No,
to see you.
I don't even remember what I was gonna say. I think back when Deborah was talking, I didn't look, I probably had never seen the whole film from start to finish. I felt like I knew every little piece, but so we just actually just finished watching it. I totally appreciate the capturing of the period, the clothes, the set, the props. Me, I just, every darn thing in that house but it's like just a little too much plenty right now when we're going through all of this stuff in our world, and there's so many children going to bed hungry and families that don't know what they're going to do with the holidays. I don't know. I would have rather, I could have done with Oliver or some, I don't really even I really don't like books about rich people. I'm never really very interested in rich people. I want the struggle of life is, so.
Well, I wonder though, if the Smiths were rich or whether in 1904 they would have been considered some version of middle class.
Right. Well, they were.
I think they
I'm
were.
sure. Of course, they didn't take the maid with them to the festival.
No, they did not.
No.
They did not do that.
No, it's like
And
they're not
Cynthia,
going to let
you
her
would
ride
like
the
to
carriage.
That was
Yeah.
one of the things I found painful. Certainly the father's reaction to the Marjorie Main character, to the maid. Very dismissive. I mean, it was like, I'm the boss, and in a way that is painful would be, it can happen today too. That's timeless, but very painful.
But it's, typical of those.
It was reality.
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
It was reality.
But it's
I
life,
will say this,
life with Father and all those other beautiful films that capture
and I think also though
family
more
life.
to the Marjorie Main. There's more to the Marjorie Main character than that, and it's true of all the maids she played at MGM. She always has a sharp tongue. She always has a very strong personality. So she's no shrinking violet, that's for sure. Though I do agree with you, Cynthia, that moment is a tough moment in this film. And who did we have a hand up there?
We do.
I haven't.
Sandy and Roger both have hands up still again.
Okay, and then we want to call on Herb Drower because it's compulsory to hear from Herb Drower. We haven't heard from him yet, but go ahead, you guys. So we're starting with.
We could start with Sandy.
Okay, I totally agree with you, Bill, and everyone who loved the song, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. I've heard it all throughout my life. And the way that Judy Garland sang it to Tootie was so hauntingly beautiful. I decided to do some research online and see who else has recorded it. And I found this website called Who Sang It Best? And I was surprised to learn, well, some were surprised, some were not. Frank Sinatra, of course, Ella Fitzgerald, James Taylor, Luther Vandross, Michael Bublé, Rod Stewart, Bing Crosby, and Coldplay all recorded it. So I thought that was kind of fun.
On it goes.
On it goes, right.
Roger and Linda, and then
Roger
Laurel
and Linda,
Kest.
and then Herb.
And Laurel Kest as well.
Okay.
I certainly think they had to be upper middle class because he was not the boss of the local office, but he was a senior partner, and they were going to promote him to New York. And the son was going to Princeton. So
at least upper middle class, at least, right?
Quite well off, yeah.
Yeah. Next
Laurel.
Laurel.
I loved the song, but it felt very much as if it had been written for the 1944 audience, the war years audience. The deprivation that we just had talked about, that Cindy, I think, had spoken of. It didn't feel to me as if it would have been written in 1903. You know, the music is supposed to be that from a period that fits in there. It's a gorgeous song, but it felt not contrived, but shaded to reach the war audience as opposed to fitting in completely. I thought The Boy Next Door fitted in wonderfully. I thought that, I love the trolley song. I don't know if anybody else got that sense that it just wasn't of the time period as much as most of it, all the other songs were.
Yeah, and I think they were a good point. And I think it's one reason why Vincent Minnelli wanted to use a bunch of songs that were from that period too. So yeah, you know, he had it both ways. I agree with you. I don't actually, for me, The Boy Next Door, while it works perfectly for the situation, in terms of the music, I don't think it belongs in 1944 at all. But it doesn't bother me at all because the sentiment is so true in the song itself. But also, you know, when you say, what we're talking about here is anachronisms. We're talking about musical anachronisms, and there's a huge one. Nancy brought it up, though we didn't have a discussion about it. That wonderful Skip to My Lou sequence, the big dance number at the party. Hugh Martin was also a first-rate vocal arranger, and he did the arrangement himself, which even manages to work in Yankee Doodle at one point. It's a Hugh Martin vocal arrangement, but it is straight out of the swing era. Straight out of the swing era. Not 1904 at all.
He used syncopation, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I guess I'm just such an easy touch because none of that bothers me.
I know. And
the song is good, and if it is related to the storytelling, I'm not so concerned about anachronisms, but that's just me. We're not going to do the diehards tonight because Joanna and Heidi told me that at 8 p.m. on NBC, there is a special called The Best of Broadway, and it's with a bunch of stars, and it's a benefit for Broadway Cares. So I'm assuming everybody in this group is going to want to see that. Yeah. So we can move on. We can move on to, oh wait, before we move on to the miscellany though, I still have 8 minutes. We have to talk about the other famous story about this movie, and Nancy and I will split it up. And the story is about how Margaret O'Brien was made to cry during that whole scene with the snowmen and that whole thing. And Nancy, why don't you tell the first part of it, the Vincent Minnelli part, and I'll tell the other one.
Yeah, I really worried about her. Boy, was she, I'm sure that's what part of what won her Oscar, right? Evidently, Vincent Minnelli was asked, well, her mother had ways of getting Margaret O'Brien into a particular moment during shooting. But at this particular time, she asked Vincent Minnelli to get her ready for the scene. And he said, well, how in the world do I do that for the emotion of that scene? And she said, well, you know, she loves her dog. Tell her that somebody's going to steal her dog and kill it. And he said, oh boy. So he said, well, Margaret, we're ready to shoot the scene now, but I'm sorry to have to tell you that someone's going to steal your dog and shoot it. And this, you know, brought up all her crying and hysterics, I guess. And she did a great job. And then he went home feeling like a monster. That's what I know.
I said to Nancy, it sort of feels to me like early method acting, you know, accessing something in there. I mean, wow. But that's not the way it's not the way Margaret O'Brien tells the story. She's still alive. I mean, she was just a little kid when the movie was made. She's only 82 now. The way she tells the story is that her mother would threaten if she didn't cry, and this was in other films too. Her mother would threaten to send the makeup artist over and spray her face with tears. And Margaret O'Brien, even as a little kid, was so proud of what she was able to do, acting-wise, that she made the tears happen. So anyway, you can choose whichever story you prefer, but they're both interesting stories, both very much. Now on to our miscellany. There are 3 of them. The next film, guess what? I don't know what it is. And one of the reasons is we're going to be taking a break during the holiday season. We will next be back with you on Thursday, January 7 for the Q&A, which means you'll get the announcement of the film the week before, okay? Number 2, this is one of our favorite slides, but Heidi Lang has given it a new twist tonight. If you enjoyed tonight's program, if you enjoyed our intro to the film, we're hoping you will consider making a gift of $20. And here's the idea. TMTP has set a goal to raise an additional $2,020 before the end of the year. Isn't that brilliant? And we hope that you will consider helping us reach that goal. As I said, this is our last Let's Go to the Movies night before we gather together again in January to kick off 2021. So tonight's the night to help us reach that goal of $2,020. Miscellany number 3. I always share a lyric. And of course, this has to be by Hugh Martin, who wrote those 3 major songs for Meet Me in St. Louis. Hugh was known more than anything else for the gentleness of his writing, which is what really has always drawn me to both his music and his lyrics. This lyric is from his first Broadway musical, Best Foot Forward, in 1941, when he was just 27 years old. And this is one of the songs from that first musical that got him the Hollywood contract and led to Meet Me in St. Louis. So this is the lyric. We only have a couple minutes, so it has 2 brilliant choruses, but I'll just share one with you. Every time my heart begins to dance, the world steps on my little toes. Every time I take a little chance, I pay right through my little nose. Every time I fly my little kite, it catches on a tree. Every time I throw an anchor out, it pulls me in the sea. Every time I feel a little glow, I always get a little shock. Every time I stick my little chin out, I always get a little knock. And when I aim my arrows at the sun, they always miss their mark, leaving just a lonely fellow in the dark. Isn't that pretty?
Yes.
It's just pretty.
Yes,
and
it
he
is.
did so much of that, songs like that. Well, you have 2 minutes to change your venue. Nancy, you and I want to thank everybody for being with us tonight, don't we? Did you have a good time?
Oh, me? Yeah, very much so.
And that means we'll bring you back.
Please.
Yes, in early 2021. And Herb, I never did really get to call on you. Were you somebody who liked the film?
That's okay. I love the film. And I'll tell you, you said in your introduction how well Vincent Minnelli treated Judy Garland pictorially. She was so beautiful in this. So beautiful. I think one of the best. I think whatever he did, she was gorgeous and it just fit in.
Okay, Herb Trower, direct from Boston. Thank you on that note. Thanks again. Have a great holiday season, you guys.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.